So that's what some of the strategies that I think can be used to help certainly younger adults. But I think now we have to be turning to look much more for what's going to happen in the future, because this is an aging population, as populations are generally, and we really need to be thinking about what's going to happen, not only as they grow older, but as their parents grow older as well. We're just following up a group of individuals who were first seen as children. We've not quite finished the study, so I haven't got the full data yet. But just to give you an idea, this was a group of people who were, on average, they were 6 years when they were first seen. Their average age is now almost 45, and their age range is almost 30 to 65. All of these individuals, when we first saw them as children, had at least a performance IQ in the normal range. So all of them had measured IQs over 70. But looking at them now, around a quarter are functioning in the more severely impaired intellectual disability range. Now, there are problems because of changes of tests and that sort of thing. So I'm not saying they've necessarily lost skills, but their level of functioning in terms of their general daily life skills, much less than it was as children. On the other hand, fewer than 10% have got really severe behaviour problems that require very intense residential placements. But at the same time, fewer than 10% are living truly independently. Some of these people, the more independent group, look quite good on paper. They've got jobs, they seem to be living in apartments by themselves, but actually in the background there's often an elderly mother or an elderly father who's making sure that they pay their bills, that they get to work in the morning, that they're able to make sure their food isn't going to poison them because it's just rotting in the fridge and so forth. So there's a hidden group of carers who are getting more and more elderly, often, physically weaker themselves, who are very concerned about what's going to happen. What's going to happen when these parents aren't around is a major consideration. And of course, we have all these very worrying statistics about society generally, that people in the over 60 in the UK now outnumber children for the first time, and growing numbers of individuals over 65, and one of the fastest growing age groups is individuals over 80. And of course, with those figures come increasing rates of dementia and Alzheimer's as people grow older. And we really don't know. We have figures for people who don't have disabilities or don't have ASD, but we don't know what the implications are for this particular group. There are no data on dementia. There are very few systematic data on changes in cognitive profiles over time, although we do know that in autism, the acquisition of new skills, compensatory skills, comes more slowly than in their non-ASD counterparts. We really don't know whether they're more likely to be affected by, natural cognitive decline than the rest of us are. It might be, for example, that because of their good memory skills, they will remain intact more than some of our memory skills do. But we really don't know, and clearly there's a lot more work to be done. What we do know is that there are risk factors for cognitive decline in the general population, and those particular risk factors are poor social networks, lack of employment, poor food, lack of exercise, long-term stress, underlying medical conditions. These all affect the rate of cognitive decline in the rest of us. And of course, these are factors that people with autism are living with on a day-to-day basis. We also know that in the general population, significant number of individuals over 65 in the EU living in poverty. And it's possible that, the risk of deprivation with age may increase because, again, risk factors are higher in the ASD population in terms of not having a job, not having friends, not having their own home, lack of support networks, and so forth. Another thing we need to consider is the effects of bereavement. Most people, as they get older, suffer bereavements, family members dying, but that may be even more traumatic for people with autism because often close relatives are the only support network they have, and if they go, who is going to fill their place? So I'm sorry to bring out all these very sort of worrying and gloomy prospects, but we do need to be thinking of how we can really sort of prepare for these difficulties and minimize the impact. So we need to have much better collaboration between services and understanding within services so that the autism needs, the physical needs, the mental health needs, and the social needs are much better dealt with. The National Autistic Society in the UK a couple of years ago made some very specific recommendations for individuals with ASD over 50, such as having advocates, proper occupational and social therapy assessments, proper health screening, training for staff involved in health and social and care services in terms of issues related to autism spectrum disorders, legal help, better access to leisure, and so forth, all of which are very sensible recommendations, but it's getting the money to fulfill those recommendations that's the major problem. We also need much more support from support and awareness from social services and government agencies. There needs to be awareness that ASD isn't just a child problem, it's an adult problem and an older adult problem as well. And that just because people have managed sometimes to struggle through adulthood without social services support, without special benefits, does not mean that they won't need those supports as they move into older adulthood. And also recognition that individuals with higher intelligence or who've had jobs or good qualifications may still have very significant needs for support. And I think the Seltzer findings that actually it's the more higher IQ individuals who get less support is particularly concerning here. Also the fact that these high levels of ongoing parent support may well disguise true levels of need. So, in fact, people with autism and their families are likely to require increased levels of support with age, not lower levels of support. And really, we need to be putting the support in before crises occur, rather than waiting until there's a major crisis. And what we need to do is the sort of Boy Scout motto of be prepared and planning for adequate provision now, before this great sort of demographic problem hits. We need to really remove this burden that many parents are feeling increasingly, the psychological worries about what will happen if they're no longer there, and of course the physical strain on families as well. We need to be building buildings that will offer people a much greater range of semi-supported living, both sometimes with other people, but often living more independently, and of course training care staff to meet the needs of this group. And I'm not sure how well you can see this, my dollar signs didn't come up very well, But essentially what's happening now is that there are huge amounts of money, and quite rightly, going into the first 6 years of life. And you heard some really splendid programs being described yesterday, which may have the potential for changing the outlook generally for older people with autism as well. But although that amount of money is clearly not being wasted, when we look at funding for older age groups, and of course people are adults much, much longer than their children, the funding tends to die away. And we really need much more equal rates of funding across each of the periods of the lifespan. And I don't need to tell people here that the care for children with autism has just improved amazingly over the decades. I mean, when I first came into the field, people were still using cattle prods to give children electric shocks for not only for challenging behaviours, but even to try and increase social behaviours and so forth. And that's a million miles away from the sorts of things that Sally Rogers was talking about yesterday, or the hopes that Amy Klin was talking about this morning. So just unbelievable changes in our approaches to intervention. And I think the same can be done for adults. We've moved a long way from the old institutions, but what we don't want is lonely elderly people just living on the streets with no support. So it's really putting in the money and the energy now into the older age groups that we've put into children's programs with so much success. So that's the challenge for the future, really focusing on these people as well as the youngest children. So thank you.